Darcy Elks is an educator, consultant, human service evaluator, and advocate on behalf of people who are societally devalued. She is a parent of 3 children, one of whom who has an intellectual disability. She has traveled internationally for 35 years and has worked with many different groups of people, including persons who have themselves been marginalized by society, family members, professionals from different disciplines, such as teachers, psychologists, social workers, members of faith communities, and human service providers from fields such as intellectual disabilities, mental health, and aging. The focus of her work is to encourage development of vision, attitudes, structures, and actions which promote social value and inclusion for people who have disabilities and other people who have been devalued and excluded. Darcy is passionate about the vision and work of creating inclusive communities, communities where we are all welcome and where we can each use our gifts for the good of one another. We are pleased to have her here today as our guest speaker. Her first presentation is titled Devaluation of Social Roles. Please join us in welcoming Darcy to our UNK community.
Let me say it's a pleasure to be here with you. The information that I'm going to share with you I'm really passionate about, and it's just so great to be with so many students and have the opportunity to share this information. So I am from Pennsylvania, Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Philadelphia. And as you heard a little bit about me, and I've been involved now for 35 plus years, I think, in different kinds of human services. And the material that I'm going to share with you, I was fortunate enough not to hear it when I was in university, unfortunately, but shortly after I started working in human services, I had the opportunity to hear the information, and it really, both as a parent, as a worker, as a consultant, this is information that has, always informed my actions. So I hope that you enjoy the presentations and will find the information really useful and relevant. The handouts are posted online, okay, so that you will have access to all of these. And our topic then for this presentation is really, what are the pathways to full, meaningful, and inclusive life? And the material that I am presenting to you was developed by a man named Dr. Wolfensberger, who was a leader in the field of intellectual disability and mental health, and he also worked quite a bit in aging. And his work started in the 1960s when he was actually a psychologist at a very large institution in Tennessee. And he was very distressed about the conditions of the institution and kept saying to himself, there has to be a better way to support people. And so he pretty much left his position as a psychologist and began a quest to figure out how could we support people with disabilities and other kinds of conditions which is the heart of the work that Dr. Wolfensberger developed. And we're also going to spend some time in part one of the presentation talking about why is it that we even need to have conferences like this and have the idea of social role valorization. So we're going to talk about something very important topic, that of devaluation, which I will define that for you in a moment. And most importantly, what happens to you in this society when you are devalued? So each and every one of you in here will touch the lives or have touched the lives of people who experience some degree of the kinds of things that I will be talking about. And then this afternoon, or the second part of the afternoon, we will talk about, so what do you do about what we talk about in the first part? How do we really work to make things better on behalf and with people who are marginalized? So this is the definition of social role valorization, and it's a mouthful, and I think most people that I talk to these ideas about, they say to me, what does that mean? So you might find yourself having that response, like, what is social role valorization? It's not the kind of language you ordinarily use, is it? So let's just start there. First of all, the heart of this idea is valued social roles. Okay, so all of you in here have valued social roles. One role that I know you have is that of being a student at university. That's a valued social role. It's a role that's thought of in a pretty positive way in our society's eyes, and hopefully in your eyes as well, all right? This is, many people aspire to be university students. And then after university, you, chances are aspiring, right, for a career. You want to find a job, and you'll be an employee on a career path. And that would be another example of a valued social role. I imagine that you are family members. That's another example of a valued social role. So these are examples, and we'll spend a little bit more time talking about, valued social roles. So that's the one part of this idea. The second part is adding value. That's what valorization means, adding value to our social roles. Now, for most people, or for a lot of people in our society, this just kind of happens naturally. You know, I mean, quite honestly, from the time you were born, and maybe even from before the time you were born, when your mom was pregnant with you, people were thinking about valued roles for you. We're going to have a new son, daughter, grandchild, a new baby. And then you're born, and you're in those roles. And then, as you grow up a little bit, you go to school at about age 5, or maybe you go to preschool and you start to enter into the role of a student. And then you move into the role of an elementary school student. And in that role, you oftentimes get an opportunity to try lots of things and develop your interests, and you pursue more roles. So maybe you tried playing soccer and you really liked it, so then you became a member of the soccer team. And so on and so forth. And the roles, in fact, are such a big part of our lives, and they're so kind of natural to us that we don't stop and think about them very much. But for people in our society, the people that you...
In her life, these are some friends from university, and she's working now. So she's working 2 jobs, she's making a decent wage, and she's having a lot of fun. She just got back from a Lady Gaga concert the other night, so that was really fun. And people started, moving into their own homes rather than being put in the institutions or, in group homes. And so this is a gentleman not too far from where I live, and he has an intellectual disability, and he actually owns his own home, so this is his house. And working, is another big focus. And of course, for those of you who are in aging, how many people here are in aging? Studying aging. Okay, so in aging, we have lots of examples of elders in our society who are very vital, right? Very vital, competent, making great contributions in a variety of valued social roles as employees, as parents, grandparents, contributors, volunteers, and so on. On the other hand, we still have institutionalization. This is a challenge for you as you move into your profession. We have closed down, largely closed down those big old places that I talked about. But you know what? We have newer brands of them. And they're a little bit harder to see. Because in those institutions, you walked in and you knew things were bad. I mean, nobody would argue with that. But nowadays, we have places that look pretty nice, but actually, what's going on is institutionalization. So here would be one of those examples. This is a day program for people with intellectual disabilities who also have physical disabilities. And what are they doing there? They're sitting. They're spending their days, young people, some of them your age, they're sitting doing nothing but watching television. And they've been put all together, you know, not knowing one another. It's not like a choice that they've made to be together every day. And it's not like they get much of a choice of activities either. And honestly, oftentimes they don't get out of that place all day long. And some people went there right after high school and they've been there for 10 years. Now that is an institution. And we still have lots of, quote, special places being built for those, quote, special people. So there are group homes that are being built where people literally, you know, they might live right in the middle of a neighborhood, but they never meet their neighbors. They're completely isolated in the group home. Put with other people who they haven't had a choice, you know, to say these are the people I'd like to live with. Also, you know, lots of times doing much of nothing. In fact, I'll tell you, this is of great concern to those of us who worked hard to get the institutions closed. There are now whole villages that are being built just for people with disabilities, just for elders. And these places, they look beautiful. But, you know, when you live there, you start to see how confining and constricted they are. So, and we still have places like this. So this is a nursing home. You know, and in this nursing home are mostly older people who are, they're not sick. They are there because they do need some support, and we haven't figured out how to provide that support in a good way in their homes. And by the way, there are also young people your age with physical disabilities who have been put into this nursing home because they can't get the attendant care, the personal support that they need in order to be within their communities and guide social rules. And you know, how many people, raise your hand if you've been in a nursing home? Okay, so most of you have seen nursing homes, and they're hard places to live. And imagine what it would be like if at the age of 19, you know, that was your option, was given to you to live in the nursing home. And this is an elderly daycare. How many people have been in an elderly daycare program? Okay, well, as part of my work, I actually evaluate lots of different kinds of programs. Does this picture look like the one I showed you earlier of the people with disabilities? Now, this hurts my heart. I go in these places, it's so distressing to see elders who have, you know, really full lives and have given so much, you know, ending up sitting, doing what? Watching television. And here's another one where actually elders are using very childish kinds of things, like childish puzzles that are designed, you know, for very young children. So, these are challenges to you as you move into your work. To really be able to discern some of the ways that institutionalization is still alive and well. And And I hope after this presentation that you'll feel really motivated and you know, really encouraged to take that on. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how do people end up in places like that? And how do people end up, sometimes you're not even in places like that, but you get treated really badly. You get devalued. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this phenomenon of devaluation. So what we mean by devaluation is that you or a group of people are seen as having really no value or very little value within the society. And that judgment is made by another person or maybe a group of people, usually based on some kind of characteristic that you have that's seen in a negative way. So for example, having an intellectual disability. Many people in the society would see that as a significant difference that they view very negatively, and so we find that you know, maybe you're not thinking that way, okay? But there are a lot of people out there who do think that way, and so what happens? The person is seen as less than, not as valuable as, not quite as worthwhile as. A second-class citizen, or maybe not even a citizen at all. And once you are thrust into a devalued status, there are a number of things that are likely to happen to you. Now, just to be clear, devaluation happens to many groups of people within our society. Those of you from social work, you may have studied this in some of your classes. And I think what we really need from young professionals are people who can really identify with people who've been thrust into a devalued status. And when we talk about identification, we could say much more about this, but when we talk about identification, it is, the definition is the becoming or making oneself one with another. So, you know, the saying that really summarizes this best is putting yourself in someone else's shoes. If I was going to give you any advice, I'm going to give you this. That you can't go too far wrong if you engage in the practice of putting yourself in someone else's shoes and saying, if this was me, how would I feel if I was sitting in that day program, watching television all the time? How would it feel if I had no choice? You know, how would it feel if I was cut off from you know, my peers and so forth? And of course, Martin Luther King was a stellar example of identification. And it's interesting if you look at this quote from Martin Luther King. He says, "I choose to identify with the poor. I choose to give my life for the hungry. I choose to give my life for those who have been left out of the sunlight of opportunity." And one of the things that's so striking to me about that quotation is identification is a choice. You don't have to do it. And he chose to really identify to the point of losing his life, right? So we're not asking you to do that, but we are asking you, you know, if you can put yourself in the shoes of someone else, that and really identify, that's going to provoke you to action. And quite a different action you would have taken if you didn't identify, if you maintained kind of a distance as a professional. So Christina has a poem I wanted to read to you that I thought it's always been a very compelling poem for me in terms of a person who lived in a devalued status asking to be, for people to listen. The name of this poem is "See Me," and you may have seen clips of this on the television. It's being used as an advertisement to sell medication these days. But it's it's much bigger poem than what you've heard on television. This was written by an older woman who died completely alone, okay, in a geriatric hospital. And after she died, and they were, cleaning up her room, they found this poem. Okay, the title is See Me. What do you see, nurses? What do you see? What are you thinking when you're looking at me? A crabby old woman, not very wise, uncertain of habit, with faraway eyes, who dribbles her food and makes no reply when you say in a loud voice, I do wish you'd try. Who seems not to notice the things that you do and is forever losing a stocking or shoe. Who, unresisting or not, lets you do as you will with bathing and feeding the long day to fill. Is that what you're thinking? Is that what you see? Well, then open your eyes, nurse. You're not looking at me. I'll tell you who I am as I sit here so still, and rise at your bidding as I eat at your will. I'm a small child of 10 with a father and a mother, brothers and sisters who love one another. A young girl of 16 with wings on her feet, dreaming that soon now a lover she'll meet. A bride soon at 20, my heart gives a leap, remembering the vows that I promised to keep. At 25 now I have young of my own who need me to build a secure, happy home. A woman of 30, my young now grow fast, bound to each other with ties that should last. At 40 my young sons have grown and are gone, but my man's beside me to see I don't mourn. At 50 once more, babies play round my knee. Again we know children, my loved one and me. Dark days are upon me, my husband is dead. I look at the future, I shudder with dread. For my young are all rearing, young of their own, and I think of the years and the love I have known. I'm an old woman now, and nature is cruel. 'Tis her jest to make old age look like a fool. The body has crumbled, grace and vigor depart. There is now a stone where I once had a heart. But inside this old carcass a young girl still dwells, and now and again my battered heart swells. I remember the joys, I remember the pain, and I'm loving and living life over again. I think of the years, all too few, gone too fast, and accept the stark fact that nothing can last. So open your eyes, nurses. Open and see. Not a crabbed old woman. Look closer. See me. And I really think that's the cry of everyone, all human beings, and certainly people who've been thrust into this devalued status and left and abandoned. So if you took nothing else from this conference, if you remembered that point about identification, that would be really valuable. Now, let's talk a little bit more about devaluation. I'm supposed to stop by 2:30 for this course.
2:45 by 30.
All right, I might go a little bit over. Okay. So, society devalues certain qualities and conditions. I've already said that. And how do we figure out what society devalues? Well, we start with what society does value. And then the opposite of that becomes devalued. So here are some of the things that are highly valued in our society. And they may not be your own personal values, but they are the values of lots of people. Wealth and material prosperity, and having, health, which of course should be valued. But when it takes over your whole life, having that ultimately healthy body, and you're terrified of becoming sick with any kind of illness, then we'd say this is now kind of the value of it has gotten closer. And having a beautiful body, according to what the society defines as a beautiful body. Women in particular would know this because there's always these ideas held out in pictures and movies and so forth about what a beautiful body is for a woman. in our society. Lots of value placed on youth, which I'm glad about, because every society needs youth. The problem is when we value youth over other age groups. Even having new things, and we also highly value confidence and independence. Have you ever heard people say, if I get to the point that I'm no longer able to take care of myself, I simply want to die? Because I don't want to be dependent? Now, we can all relate to that, right? We want to retain as much, be able to do as much for ourselves as we can, but it's pretty extreme to say you'd rather be dead than have some assistance. Right? Lots of value placed on being productive and achieving, and the next one, this idea of not individual expression. I'm not talking about that and growing in your individual identity. What I'm talking about here is this idea of it's me, myself, and I, and it's my choice that counts, and I don't really care about you. I come first. And you hear that all the time. And lots of value placed on pleasure. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have pleasure, we shouldn't have fun in our lives, that's part of a good life. But when it goes to the extreme, that we value pleasure over everything else, that's problematic. And we get to the point where we value pleasure that much, we want comfort, convenience, ease, and we don't want anything to do with suffering, trial, and hardship. Okay, so the opposite of this becomes devalued, doesn't it? So if wealth is valued, the opposite of this is poverty, right? If health is valued, sickness would be the opposite of that. If youth is valued, the opposite would be elderly, right? If being productive and achieving, and people's mindset about that, climbing up the career ladder of success and so forth is valued, the opposite of that becomes devalued. If me doing whatever I want, when I want, how I want it, if anything that gets in the way of that is going to be devalued. Now, what's really important for you to note about this, and these are just pictures, we'll go through this quickly, is that it's not only the opposite of these conditions that are devalued, but it's people who embody these conditions. It's not only poverty, it's people who are poor. Okay? It's not only aging, it's people who are elders who are devalued. It's not only anything that gets in the way of me doing what I want to do, when I want to do it, and how I want to do it, but it's people who cause some trial and hardship and remind me of suffering and get in the way of me doing everything I want to do. So, you have chosen professions where you will constantly be in contact with people who are devalued in our society and relegated to a low social status. And so there are many people, by the way, who are devalued. It isn't just people with disabilities. It isn't just elders. Okay? It isn't just people who are impoverished. Even for something, as simple as your activity level. Kids who are highly active in class, they become devalued. People who are unemployed become devalued. What about people in prison? I don't know, some of you may be in social work and you may be working with people who are incarcerated. And those are some among the most devalued people in our society. Some of you are going to be working with older people. Very devalued group of people. All right, so here are some of the experiences that people have. You know what? When you have a devalued condition, lots of times you get, your identity gets reduced to that of your condition. So I can't tell you the number of places I've gone into for elders where people are referred to as the demented. Or those people, memory impaired. I just recently developed a little bit of an issue with my back, and so when I'm traveling and I'm going through the airports, I use a wheelchair. And it is amazing, and people help you in the airports to get through using the using a wheelchair. And so many times, you know, there'll be people who will be pushing us, and then they'll leave us in a place ready to come back and get us because they have to go get someone else, and you'll hear them use this language. Okay, I just put them there, 4 wheelchairs. It makes me want to say, wait, you know, I'm a person in that wheelchair. People's identity can be reduced to a diagnosis, you know, to a condition. My daughter has Down syndrome, and you know, it just is it was amazing growing up how many times she was referred to as a Downs. Oh, that Downs. That she's one of those Downs. And of course, that's demeaning, isn't it? When your identity gets reduced to that of your, you know, of your condition that you're living with, and it's only part of your identity, right? So I would always say, oh, you're talking about my daughter who loves dance, loves hip hop in particular, you know, et cetera, et cetera. She's more than Downs. Okay, people as well then oftentimes who are devalued get rejected, pushed apart, away and aside. I showed you pictures of that when we began. And they also, as opposed to those valued roles that I spoke about, people get thrust into devalued roles. So these I'm going to run through quickly because when we come back after the break, I'm going to talk about positive roles. So it's helpful to have a little bit of an idea of the negative roles. So sometimes people are seen as not being fully human. I mean, honestly, you know, being more like an animal or a vegetable, you know, than a human being. Here would be an example. This is a young man with autism, and they're saying it's this kind of an alien idea that he needs to learn how to communicate, and it's hard for him to communicate because he has a hard time reading facial expressions. Okay, so that's fair enough. So you know how they're proposing to teach him to do that? By working with a robot. So just think about this. In order to learn how to read facial expressions, do you think a robot is going to be that useful or helpful? No, right? You need to be around people and get practice with people. So that puts it in such a negative kind of role. And also, this is a new healthcare thing that's been developed in robot, that's been developed in Japan to provide care to elders. Can you think about your grandparents being given care by this robot and like the robot picking you up and holding you? Like, it's so odd and so unusual, right? And so we're putting people into this role being so different from the rest of, you know, of everybody else. This is a bed in a hospital for a child who is sick. And what does that bed look like?
Cage.
It kind of looks like a cage, doesn't it? Yeah. Are people being put into the role of being dangerous? This is a young man in Holland. And I was over there doing some presenting, and this story came out in the newspaper. He was 15 years old. He has autism. He was having a hard time with the hormones and being a teenager and all that. And his mother, who's a single mom, went and asked for help, and this is what they offered her. And this is a recent story. Institution. Oh, good. Oh, thank you. Okay. So this is an institution. And he, not only was he in the institution, can you see what he's got on him? You know what that is? You ever seen anything like that? Maybe not. It's a restraint. So he is restrained and he is hooked to the wall. So you might say, okay, well, let me just finish with this. So the good news is, when people found out about this, an advocacy organization found out about it, and they worked very diligently and were able to get him out of this institution. And by the time he got out, he was 18. He was in here for 3 years. And he now has the opportunity, well, actually he has his own apartment. He's 20 now, he has his own apartment, he has a job, he has a girlfriend, and he's thinking about getting married. So his life is completely different. This story has a happy ending, but nevertheless, at one point, he was being treated, you know, as a real menace. Okay. Okay, so here's another being put into the role of being waste material. I've already showed you examples of that where people were just put apart and away, kind of discarded by the society. I have one example from education that is a pretty compelling one. This is a charter school, and in the charter school they have resource rooms for students who need extra help. And so they'd asked me to come and visit, and they were showing me their resource rooms. But I was absolutely floored and things looked pretty good, on the tour, until we were walking down the hallway, and the tour guide opened the door to the storage closet. I thought, that's kind of odd, like I don't need to see the storage closet. We walked past the big shelves of toilet paper and paper towels and Windex and so forth, into a resource room that had been built specifically for 4 boys, and it was literally a plywood box in the middle of the storage room. And these 4 boys were kids who had some pretty hard things that they were dealing with in their homes, and they were kind of angry, and so there were times that they were non-compliant. And the way the school dealt with it was to put them into a box, a plywood box, in the middle of the storage closet. Could it be clearer to those boys what we really think of them? Or people are put into the role of being trivial. So I thought this was a good example of this. This is a nursing home, and they recognize that elders who move into the nursing home are pretty lonely. And that's one of the things that happens to you, right, as you age. Partners may pass away, your friends may start passing away, you may become more isolated, so you don't have opportunities to make new friendships. So there was a recognition on the part of the nursing home that this is an issue for the people that are living there, and the way they decided to try to resolve that is on admission to the nursing home, every resident is given a teddy bear. Now, that's trivializing loneliness, right? Instead, there could have been, some work done to make sure that people could get out and meet some new people and have contact with family and so forth. Here, putting people into that role being pitiful. So this is a newspaper article that thousands of people saw in the city near where I live. And you look at that picture, right? It says a special, Lancaster Sunday News, a special place for kids, a place to relate. Now, clearly, you look at that picture, you know that the gentleman in the picture is not a young child. And when people, what age are people when they grab adults' legs like that? Typically 3, maybe even younger too, right? So what do you think most people seeing this picture are thinking about that young man? Because he's in his 20s. Oh, what a shame. Poor guy. So it conveys a very, negative role about him. People are put into the role of being a burden of other people's charity. So this is kind of like the idea of the orphanage, where, the big one I think about is Oliver Twist. We're going to give you some charity. We're going to take care of you poor orphans, but you better just be happy for whatever you get. No complaining. And you'll find that as professionals within the human service system, lots of times when you see that somebody has a need that's being unmet and you advocate with that person or for that person, you may get this kind of response. What do you mean? What do you mean he doesn't like the day program? What do you mean he doesn't have enough food stamps? He ought to be happy he even gets food stamps. What do you mean she doesn't like living in this retirement village? She's lucky that she got a spot in the retirement village. Right? Well, that's that kind of attitude of, people being a burden of charity on other people. And by the way, this role implies a superiority and inferiority. So we, the people who give to you, we are the superior ones. You are the inferior one. And so You just, shut up and put up, basically. Okay, people are also put into the role of being a child. If you're a child, that's a great role to be in. The problem is when you're an adult and you're put into that role. So here's the bedroom of a 35-year-old man. And can you see that the bedspread is a Power Rangers bedspread? So I don't know many, or maybe no, 35-year-old man who would want a Power Rangers bedspread. And then if you look carefully enough, you can see there's a teddy bear there, and there's even a toddler toy. And sometimes when I show this slide, people will say, well, maybe he chose it. Well, I can tell you, he did not choose it. It was chosen for him, and he lives in isolation, in this room. He has absolutely no idea what kinds of bedspreads are out there and ways to decorate your room. Because he's just never really had an opportunity to learn. So this has been chosen for him. And so what's the big deal? Well, you could probably get away with having a Power Rangers bedspread. And nobody would think, they'd think, oh, you're a little odd. But you have many other valued roles, right? But he has a pretty significant intellectual and physical disability. And so when people see this bedroom, they put it together, that this is his bedroom, this is Ron's bedroom, what are they thinking about Ron? What are they thinking? Here is someone who is a lot younger than who he really is, right? He's a big child. And that puts him at risk. Because of the way he gets treated then as a result of seeing him as a child. And elders, this happens all the time with elders. They're put into the role of being a child. So here's a woman, it's quite a compelling picture, isn't it? She really loves children, I think, and babies, and what did they give her? Can you tell what that is? It's one of those lifelike dolls. So if she really loves children, rather than giving her a doll that girls play with, what could you do? What could she be doing? Speak up. I think you're saying, yeah.
Oh, I don't know, bring in children or take her to like a,
Well, give her the opportunity to be with children, right? So, at one point in my life, I worked in a daycare center, and I worked in the infant room, and each one of the workers were assigned 3 babies. That may not sound like a lot to you unless you've had babies, but 3 babies to care for it's a lot. And we could have always used somebody in that infant room who wouldn't have to change diapers or anything like that, could sit in a rocking chair, and we could give the baby to the person, and the person would rock the baby. It would have been enormously helpful. Oh, this is unbelievable. So I want you to think about somebody you know who's older, maybe your grandfather or your grandmother. So this is actually something that is being sold, okay? And it was developed by a materials and equipment kind of company. It is called Snaky, all right? And I'm going to read to you what Snaky does. It's a multi-purpose, multi-sectional plush puppet pal. 7 types of fasteners join 7 colorful detachable segments to provide a variety of manipulative experiences. Snaky keeps hands busy with buttons, snaps, laces, fasteners, a zipper, clip, and buckle, while its head functions as a hand puppet. Wonderful for those with dementia, a great tool for improving fine motor skills, and a fun way to relearn living tasks for post-stroke patients. I'm telling you what, if I had a stroke and I was trying to recover and somebody put Snaky around my neck, I probably would not be seen as a good patient. Okay, and people are also put into this role of being a client, and of course, all of us are clients in some way or another. If you have a hairdresser or you go to a lawyer, You know, you're a client, but it's a pretty minor role for you. It doesn't take over your identity. You're going to see, and maybe, you know, people who are doing their internships for sure will see this soon, but all of you will, if you pursue a career in human services, you will see how people who are devalued, their identity gets reduced to that of being a client, and it's usually a dependent client who gets controlled by other people. Other people tell you what to do, how to do it, when to do it, how much you can do, how much you can't do, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we thought this was an example. This again is an example from a group home. And this is a place where people in their 20s live, okay, so close to your age. And outside of the bedroom of the people who live here are these, what they call care trackers. You might have seen these in hospitals. Nurses often use them to keep track of you know, fluid intake and blood pressure and so forth, which is a pretty good use of them. But they've been adapted to this group home. Can you imagine this? You live in a group home, you're in your 20s, and outside of your bedroom is this care tracker that people are continually filling in about you. And then listen to the categories. So current clients, he's going to imagine outside of your dorm room, if anybody lives in the dorms or anything in dorms, that the RA would come up and do, you know, would fill these in for you. Your current compliance, your fluid intake, your weight loss, your average meal intake. Now I thought this one was really interesting. New behaviors in the last 24 hours. Total behaviors in the last 24 hours. And lastly, no behaviors in the last 24 hours. No behaviors? What if you're not having any behaviors at all, right? You're not living, right? So, you know how this would be really intrusive for you, wouldn't it? And pretty stigmatizing. And do you think some of you in here might get angry if people were watching you that closely and outside of your dorm room, keeping track of these things, where everybody else could see it? So that's really putting people big time into the role of being a client. People as well are seen as sick when they're not sick. If you're sick, that's a fine role to be in, but older people, this is a very powerful role that surrounds them. You can tell it by the language that's used. You know, that people are referred to as patients who need to be in a place where there's nursing care, right? And medication is given, there's a prognosis, there's a diagnosis, there's a prognosis. Anytime you hear that kind of language, you know it's people are being put into that role of being sick. And it's totally appropriate if you're sick. You know, the problem is when you're not sick and you're put in that role. So, you know, if you're older and you do need some assistance, that is different from being sick. Some older people are sick, okay, and then that's appropriate. But the point is when you're not sick, okay, and you're put in this role. Okay, and lastly, which is a really hard thing to think about, is the role of dying already dead, as good as dead, or better off dead. So unfortunately, we do live in a time when a lot of people think that if you have a significant disability, you would really be better off dead. They might not say it forthrightly, but it is a thought that's out there in a lot of people's minds. And here's one of the primary promoters of that thinking. This is Dr. Peter Singer. He's the head of the ethics department at Princeton University, and he's from Australia originally. He started out as an animal activist, animal rights activist. He then progressed to talking about ethics around people, not animals, and in his book Practical Ethics, which was, the third edition was published in 2011, he said, these are direct quotes. Killing a disabled infant is not morally equivalent to killing a person. Often it is not very wrong at all. He also says, killing a chimpanzee is worse than the killing of a human being who, if there is a congenital intellectual disability, is not and can never be a person. So it's just important for you to know, as people who hopefully are going to make a big impact in this world, that kind of thinking is out there. And by the way, it's around elderly people too. You know, there's so many examples. Governor Lamb of Colorado, he was governor a number of years ago, he actually made a public statement that elderly people had a duty to die to free up resources for younger people. I recently went to visit a day program for elders, and one of the activities was that every month they went to a different funeral home in their area to talk about their funeral plans. Now, I am all for planning for your funeral. I think it's a great idea. Every month? Right? That's a bit morbid, isn't it? Okay. So let's just quickly, I have a few more minutes, just finish this piece up. So we've talked about, you know, the roles that people are cast into. As well, we find that I've given you pictures of this already. The way that people are distanced. They put a part in the way physically and also socially. So you'll be able to read the handouts when they go online. But here are some pictures. How many of you still see the short buses? Using those short buses. So those are usually kids who are in the special education classes. And those classes still oftentimes are separate from, you know, the rest of the school. And the kids may never have interaction with the other kids in the school. And this is a boarding home. You have these as well in Nebraska. This is from Pennsylvania. You have many of them throughout the state where people with mental illness are living, you know, all put together almost in isolation. This is a really interesting one from Canada. Can you see there's a playground back here? And so they had a pretty positive idea. They said, we ought to have an all-abilities swing. In other words, that would be a swing that kids with disabilities could use as well. So that was a nice idea. So they raised the money to get the swing. Can you see what they put around the swing here? Can you see the fence? So that means that the kids who run the all-abilities swing are not going to be able to interact with these kids, and these kids are certainly not going to interact with these kids. And look at the sign. So there you go. Restricted area. Users and carers as required only in this area. So that doesn't give a very positive message to the kids, does it? And you know what the kids who play in this playground learn without anybody ever honestly telling them directly? Those kids are different from you. Maybe that you got to be really careful around them. And, you know, they didn't even know that they learned that. All right. The other thing that happens is people get surrounded by lots of negative images that convey negative messages. So we use images all the time to communicate with one another. I mean, you see that? You see a graveyard, instantly you're thinking of death. You see the sign, you know there's a hospital nearby, right? This is the use of an image to communicate. You see this, you think of Olympic athletes, right? The Olympic rings, and that brings images of vitality and strength and power. There's all kinds of inspirational, art that conveys very positive, messages. So this is a really familiar image in our culture that conveys a message. So what does this convey to you when you see a skull and crossbones on a bottle of water, for example? I don't know if that actually means weightlifting, did you say? You know this means poison, right? Potential danger. Okay, so it carries that meaning in it. Now, if you knew me and you were thirsty, would you take a glass of water from me? You probably would be likely to take that glass of water. Well, what if I offered you a glass with that image on it? You'd probably say, thanks, but no thanks. Why? Because the meaning of the image transferred onto what was attached to it. This happens with people as well. Just take a look at some of these images. All right, so In the middle there, this building, okay, is a nursing home. And you can see it looks out, one side looks out on the cemetery. The second side of this building looks out on another side of the cemetery. The third side of this building, there's a senior high-rise and another part of the cemetery, and the fourth side looks out on the cemetery. This is a building in the middle of the cemetery, and it's a place for elderly people to live. So can you imagine moving into this building and looking out the window and contemplating your future? And just think about what's being conveyed to all the professionals in that building, right? And what's conveyed to the families of people who live in that building. And what's conveyed to people who drive by on their way to work every day about the people in that building. Reinforcing kind of that image in our mind that, you know, elderly people are really, you know, close to death. You start looking for these images, you'll be amazed at what you see. So this is a rest home, again, a place for older people, located where? Can you read it? On a dead end. All right, so dead end locations, start looking there. Very common for human services. This is an interesting one. County of Belknap Department of Corrections Nursing Home. It sounds like it's a nursing home for people who worked in corrections, right? But no, it's a prison and a nursing home on the same piece of land. So it conveys that image, you know. Well, when you're older or a prisoner, you know, they all kind of belong together. This, I'm not kidding you, is an old school that was converted into a boarding home. And they just didn't even bother to change the inside. This is a place where people live. And this is, it says first grade there, right? This is someone's bedroom. And this person who lives here is an adult. It's just the whole thing is so weird. So it conveys a really confusing message. Like, who's in this building? What? That's a bedroom? Okay, this is a small institution, a more contemporary institution than the pictures I showed you. And what do you think? So it's a little odd to have a stop sign in the middle of a hallway, isn't it? You see that stop sign? And when you ask, like, why is that stop sign there? Well, because we want people to get practice using stop signs. It makes no sense, because right outside of the building, there's a street with a real stop sign. This is kind of stigmatizing. I don't know, you know, what does it say about the people who are in this hallway? You know, they're not very confident, they're pretty incapable. Okay, so this is a new and seen as a cutting-edge service for elders with memory loss. And they literally have built a facade of porches that you'd see on houses back in the 30s and the 40s. So they're not, so just imagine this, you're confused, okay? You're an older person and you're confused. And you're told, we're going to welcome you to the memory neighborhood. So I don't know, how many people have been in places, these are usually upscale and quite expensive places with memory neighborhoods. The idea is, you know, this is where you're going to live, okay? But it's confusing to people. What does a memory neighborhood mean when you're moving into it? And then you move in, and it looks like you're on a street. And you can sit on those front porches, and they might remind you of a house that you had at one point in your life, or not. And then you'd get up and you try to go in the front door. But you see, it's not, it's just the porch. And the grass is that, you know, the fake plastic grass? You know what I'm talking about? Like they have them in relief stations for dogs. So this is like fake plastic grass. And you might say, okay, well, it looks like there's a skylight there, you know, so that natural light can get in. Nope. That is a ceiling that has, you know, clouds and sun. It's some kind of computer-generated sky. That now, do you think that would be confusing if you already have memory loss? What do you think? Pretty confusing, isn't it? I just wonder, where do people get these ideas? And then they, not only do they have that, but they've built a whole street of shops, only the shops are not real. So you'd be walking along and you'd see, I don't know, the coffee shop. And then you try to get into the coffee shop, and it's not really the coffee shop. This doesn't make any sense. And you just think, what's the image of the people? About the people who would be put in something like this? Oh, they don't really know the difference. What difference does it make? It's not a real store. It's not a real house. And grouping people together, so this is actually a small group of people who decided to go on a cruise together, but the problem is that this is actually a big organization that takes people with intellectual disabilities on vacation, and so it's not just this one group that's going on the cruise, they have 10 groups going on the cruise. So when people are all seen together, you know, the other people on the cruise, do you think they're going to have a lot of interaction with the people with disabilities? Probably not, because this altogether is like 60 people as a group, you know, who are on this cruise. That's overwhelming to most people. And it reinforces that image. Yep, all those people that kind of belong together. Okay, so the activities that you engage in can convey messages about you, much like having a snaky put around your neck. I'll tell you one thing, when I retire, I'm not looking forward to sitting in a chair and playing the parachute game. I did that with my children, and I did it as a preschool teacher. And what kind of image is conveyed about people, and those are the kinds of activities they are presented with. This one you can't read, but I will just give you one example. This is a day program for elders, and we went there around Halloween, which is always interesting. And they said, we'd like you to come and visit the first session we have. It's called Living or Dead. You're like, living or dead? So we went to the session, so the people who attend the program came into a room, and the animator of the group stood up and called out names of people. So like Abraham Lincoln, living or dead. Okay? Elvis Presley, living or dead. So you might have some controversy over that one, right? For all of the imitators of Elvis Presley. That was the oddest thing. And you know what the next activity was? Reading tombstone inscriptions. I'm not kidding you. And here are people in their 80s and 90s. You know what I mean? This was not how they wanted to spend their time, to say nothing of the way it was stigmatizing people. Even the names of places can convey negative images. So I went to a home for neglected or abused youth. I was doing an evaluation of it. And I'm not kidding you. The name of this place was the Whipper Home. Or, you know, a drop-in day center for people who are elders called the Bleak House. It wouldn't exactly be the kind of place you would be wanting to go to, I don't think. And this is an interesting one. The clinic for people who are addicted to alcohol, spelled differently but pronounced the Bar Treatment Center. It's all about the image that's conveyed, you know. And here's one from England. The last one, which is a sub sandwich shop staffed by people with intellectual disabilities. No kidding, called the Subnormal Sandwich Shop. Right? So another way that people get image. Okay, look at this one. Caution, elderly passengers. You wonder what's going to happen. Are the elders going to come bounding out at you? Right? Or how about this sign? The sign for the cemetery. Underneath it is the sign of the, you know, for elders, and then the sign underneath says elderly people. So how, this is imaging people, right? As being weak, feeble, and, you know, interested at the very least and probably close to death. So this is a van that drives around a small city near where I live, the House of Re-Education of Addicts. And then it says underneath that, in case you observe any abnormalities, please call. So what are you thinking about people who might be in that van? And if you were addicted and you were receiving recovery services, would you want to be in that van? Would you want people to be reading that about you? This is a nursing home. This is the sign out in front of it. The name of the nursing home is St. Paul's Hermitage. It says, if heaven has a lobby, St. Paul's Hermitage is it. So when you move into this place, where are you moving into? The lobby of heaven. And do you know how the place is organized? The people with more competencies start on floor 1. As you lose competencies, you move up until you get to floor 5. And that's the end. A textbook that's used in university to teach about adolescents who are, disturbed. What an image to give to students, right, of people that they might be working with. This is a fundraiser that was done by the National Paraplegia Society. They went door to door selling wheelchair mixed nuts. And this is, again, a service for elders, and the sign kind of says it all. You can rest home, 24-hour care. You leave them, and we'll love them.
Oh my gosh.
All right, so that was imagery, and then the last thing, obviously, that this sequence leads to is, some discrimination, and worse than that, even abuse. And even something that Dr. Wolfensberger called death making, which is the hastening of people's life or the shortening of their death or the shortening of their lives. So that's a very quick overview of this. I hope some of it resonated with you. I really hope that you will remember this as you're moving into your respective professions. It won't be hard to see it. Once you have your consciousness raised, it will not be hard to see it.